Hello students, welcome to today's daily news analysis. As always, we are referring to the Delhi edition. So we have some political crisis that is brewing in Bihar. So some political tension that is taking place. I think it's natural in our polity. So whenever elections are going to come, there are some tensions that come. Okay, so some defection like scenario. So we have Nitish Kumar. You can see the pic over here. So he heads the JDU party. So in Bihar, the JDU party alongside the BJP is ruling. So they have the majority and therefore the head of the JDU party, Nitish Kumar, is the chief minister. Now there is a possibility that the chief minister may ditch the BJP. This keeps happening in Bihar, especially at the JDU party. This keeps taking place. Earlier, the JDU party had a coalition government with non-BJP parties, right? So non-BJP group. Then he shifted to the BJP. Fine. So let's see what happens over here. Moving on to the next news. Don't disturb normal affairs with Sri Lanka, says China to India. You know, this is pretty hypocritical of China. So we have this issue. In Sri Lanka, there is their naval ship. There is this ship, scientific ship that is coming to Sri Lanka. It is docking over there. It will be there for a week, which will be observing the space-related aspects. But it has a defense capability also. If it can have surveillance in space, it has radars. It can survey the Indian Ocean region. And India has reservations about it. Fine. India has reservations about it. Now the Chinese are saying that, see, we are performing our legitimate legitimate exploration activities. It's a scientific exploration. We are rightful. We can do this. And beyond this, they are also talking about the law of the sea. So what is the law of the sea? It is coming from the UNCLOS. While they are talking about the law of the sea and the rules-based order, but when we are engaging in the South China Sea, or when the Taiwan is having military drills or anything, then they have a problem. So the rules should be equally applied, but they have a problem when it is on the Chinese shore, when Asian country is engaging with India, but they don't have, but the same rules they would say are applicable if the Chinese are coming towards the Indian side. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So now if you want to know more about the law of the sea, I have a detailed video, about 10-15 minutes video on UNCLOS, law of the sea and associated agency. So the entire concept I have explained over there. Okay, so Maharashtra cabinet expansion today. Some news about the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. Krishna Godavari levels on the rise. Heavy rain in catchment areas in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana. Yesterday we had talked about some dams being opened up for the water to flow. Fine. So yeah, this is it. Tripped by Manja, food delivery agent dies in road accident. So yesterday, I mean some days back, this week I think, previous week, we had talked about the NGT asking the state to impose some sort of regulations or ban the use of the Chinese manja. Okay, so more news. Congress promises handouts in run-up to Himachal Pradesh Assembly. Time to take pledge against nepotism, center state issue. This is important. Kerala government objects to reissue of ordinances. Very, very important. Your Lakshmikant Parliament chapter has a reference of ordinances. We don't have to go into this article over here, not required. All we wanted was the issue of the ordinance, and after a very, very long time, we have an article on this. Okay, so basically, what is ordinance? See, there is executive, that is the government, and there is the legislature, which makes the laws. So the legislature is like the state legislative assembly or the parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, that is the legislature. So it is their job to discuss, deliberate on a particular bill. That is, bill is basically a proposal for a law, and Once it is debated, deliberated, then it becomes a law, right? Obviously, with the houses voting on that. So the lawmaking is the domain of the legislature, but sometimes legislature may not be there in the house. Some urgency would be there, and for that, the executive may pass a law. Can enact a law, which is a temporary law, which is valid for 6 months, and then within that time period, the legislature has to pass it. It has to approve it. Okay, so it is a temporary law, but it is there for 6 months. This temporary law that is passed by the executive is known as the ordinance. So this is a very important topic. I was thinking I'll make a video on this. I want to make a video on this. This is very important. Okay, so pros and cons. Why should we have ordinance? What are the judgments of the Supreme Court? So all of that we should be having. Chhattisgarh, leading state in protecting and promoting the rights of tribal. Now, two things, I mean, before going forward. If you are from Chhattisgarh and state PCS, if appearing for that, so you should keep an eye on such things. You get the initiatives of that particular state. You know, there is typically, they say that you have to refer to the state budget, state economic survey. Yeah, you have to do it, but it's not always feasible. You don't always have so much time also. Going through all the documents, YouTube, we think is also not very proactive on that. So these news articles are actually very good. These news advertisements. So government is promoting, we have done this. So why are you searching? They're on paper. Okay. So right of tribals is very important. In fact, tribal issue in itself is very important. So tribals, their right to forest land. So that is there. The issue of health, the impoverishment of the tribals. So here the state is working on sustained livelihood. So what should be done about that? Then what is not mentioned is tribal art and culture. That is very important. Okay. Education, tribal education. Then tribal areas are Naxal prone areas, left wing infested. So yeah. So what developmental activities, what things can be done to rectify that? Okay, so this is there. Then one more issue that is emerging in the present times is within the tribal health, you know, the healthcare of the tribals. There is one issue is that we are seeing a declining child sex ratio. You know, the population of girl in the census, this is coming down. Typically in the tribal, this thing, because they're not expected to be patriarchal, so it's more egalitarian, so you expect the girl and boy ratio to be good. In fact, number of girls tend to be a bit more as compared to the boys. But in this case, in overall, we are seeing that the child sex ratio, the gender aspect, this is going downwards. So what are the reasons associated with it? So typically it is seen this, now this thing is happening. So this was asked in the mains paper. Okay, preserving cultural heritage. So again, for prelims also, what is the cultural heritage? What all art forms are there associated with the tribals? And what is the government doing? That is the mains aspect. Okay, so now why is this there? Obviously for elections, but besides this, 9th August is the World Tribal Day. And I'll add one more thing. I missed this. Jai Johar, Jai Chhattisgarh. I don't know what Johar means. Can somebody please search and mention in the comment section? Has to be something to do with the tribal. Okay, we have an article on the tribal healthcare. Launch a national tribal health mission. I have posted posted this on the Instagram. This image over here. Important points I have mentioned. Okay. So one is about the vice president. So new vice president is there. So the former governor of Bengal has been appointed as the vice president of India. So if a person is the vice president, he is the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. So that means he'll preside over the Rajya Sabha, right? By virtue of being a vice president, one is also the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. So as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha, the new president must take initiatives to ensure that the Rajya Sabha, at least his house, functions well in the parliament. And he bridges the gap between the ruling party and the opposition party. I find this a bit too far-fetched, this dream over here, because it's one of the governors who had a strong tension between the Bengal government ruled by the non-BJP party, TMC, and obviously the governor who's from the BJP. Okay, so let's see. PMLA verdict, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So the verdict on that, the Supreme Court's view on that. So obviously it gives more stringent powers. So and as a result of this, the due process will be bulldozed, right? So it is not a fair this thing. So that's what this article is saying. I'm not doing this. My philosophy is very simple. Do an article once, and it is once and for all. It is done. I have to make a video on this. I know I have to make a video. Now moving to the next article, a law without a flaw. So let's put it this way, law with a flaw, right? So this is about some recent Supreme Court, it's hearing a case on Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. So this is about abortion. So there is a lot of talk about abortion taking place, especially with the famous Roe versus Wade case in the US. Then there was some referendum also in the Kansas province of USA. So a lot of things about abortion is going on. So it's there in the news, it's theme. It can be in GS1 also, it can be in GS2 also. It depends on the way the question is framed. Fine. Now let us see what this is about. Very briefly, we have to do this because we don't have much. Okay, so Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act is the law which provides for the manner in which abortion thing will be done. And besides this, there are rules. So from time to time, the executive makes rules for better implementation of the law. So those are rules, right? So this act is there, and then there are a set of rules made by the executive. So these rules had a flaw. That is, it prohibited unmarried women who are between 20 weeks and 24 weeks to terminate the pregnancy. Now you see the problem? Unmarried woman is prohibited. So if somebody is in a live-in relationship, one woman gets pregnant, so it prohibits unmarried women, right? So you get the problem over here. Okay. So it is violative of Article 14 of the Constitution, the equality before law and equal protection of laws. So the law should be equally applied to everyone. Why are unmarried women out of it? Why are they not able to seek pregnancy, termination of the pregnancy? So this was a problem. Now previously Supreme Court has allowed, Supreme Court is the final interpreter of the law, and Supreme Court, what it says, it's final. So Supreme Court has interpreted the law. Such cases have come before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has said that fine, you can get your pregnancy terminated. But imagine how difficult this is. You go from the lower courts, High Court, Supreme Court, how difficult that is. And obviously the number of weeks also are increasing in the meantime. Why not just solve this problem once and for all? If the executive cannot do it, if the legislature cannot do it, the Supreme Court can do it, right? So in our country, Supreme Court has been given some additional powers in that regard. Okay. So Supreme Court may consider changing this altogether. Supreme Court, we have Justices D.Y. Chandrachud and J.B. Pardiwala. So they are considering that access to medical abortion a level playing field. So that may be done. So they are considering. It has not happened, but they are considering to correct this anomaly. And in fact, they have asked that they have allowed somebody to get this pregnancy done, and they're saying that we can change this and rectify this anomaly so that others don't have to undergo that ordeal of going to the Supreme Court. And besides, it is asking the government or exhorting the government to have a forward-looking interpretation of the law. Fine, that law is there, which is about pregnancy, to have a forward-looking interpretation. Don't say you are not a married woman, so you cannot get this thing. So it reflects the mindset also, the patriarchal mindset. So that has to be, that should not be. I mean, the center should, the government should have a forward-looking interpretation. And besides, the law as well as the rules mentioned partner and not husband. So being married is not should not really be a problem according to the rules also. Fine. Moving to the next article, launch a national tribal health mission. So this is about tribal health. We get a lot of inputs about tribal health over here. Just a second. Yeah, 1 second. Yes. Yeah. So see, tribal health is very, very important. And yeah, in this article, we are getting some important facts plus some recommendations over here. So Mr. Abhay Bang was part of a committee, expert committee on tribal health. So he was part of an expert committee on tribal health. So naturally, tribal health is one of the ignored issues and how that has to be rectified. So an expert committee was formed. He was one of the members in that, and they gave their report to the then Health Minister J.P. Nadda, who's now the head of the president of the BJP. So this was in 2018. He said that this report will not lie under the shelves, and we will soon implement this recommendations. So it's been 4 years and nothing has happened. This report is still under wraps. And sadly, when he's giving his article also, he doesn't say what measures have to be taken. But we can guess that, right? It's not that difficult. Okay, so we get good information over here. So that way, this article is good, and that's why I have shared this with you. Okay, so I want you to have this. Okay, so there are these, according to the last census, 2011 census, 11 crore tribal people are there in our country, which constitutes 8.6% of India's total population. So, you can use this not for just for this health issue, but any other aspect you can talk about this. 8.6% of India's population is tribal, according to the census 2011. Okay. Now we have this, but we have our government performing very well on the health indices. So there is this report published in the Lancet. This Lancet report is very, very important overall. And if in future you want to find anything about the healthcare sector, healthcare overall, you can refer to the Lancet or you can refer to the National Family Health Survey. These two are sufficient, very legitimate. Okay. So they had said that India held the inglorious distinction of having the second highest number of infant mortality rate. And infant mortality rate is much, much higher. It's higher as compared to the other population, general population. Naturally, it is reflecting of neglect on the part of the government. Okay, so this expert committee was formed to look into this issue, and yeah. Now, some of the findings of this report were, so the first that the tribal people are concentrated in 809 blocks in India. In our country, we know that there are certain states that are tribal. More tribal population is there. For example, Chhattisgarh. You'll not find Punjab giving an ad on the tribals. No, their population is more. It's a significant electorate, people who vote. Okay, so it's in the 809 blocks, and that too mostly in the scheduled areas given in the constitutions, schedule 5 and schedule 6. So scheduled areas for the areas where tribals have greater autonomy, greater number of population, so greater autonomy for governance. Okay, so this is expected that they are more into this scheduled areas. However, the report found, very interesting, that half of India's tribal population is actually living outside the scheduled areas. And it is those who are living outside the scheduled areas are more vulnerable. They are a scattered and marginalized minority. So they are powerless. Then, as we said earlier also, the excess under 5 mortality among the STs compared has actually widened. It is one of the highest. Right, same over here. Now we already had diseases like malaria, tuberculosis. So these diseases are 3 to 11 times more amongst the tribal population. So you see, diseases are there obviously across the population, but the percentage is much more in the tribal population. And it is not just this, spreadable diseases, communicable, but also the non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, cancer, mental health. These issues are also emerging. And this needs attention from the government. And these are very, very expensive. I mean, these treatments are difficult. On the child malnutrition front also, we are backwards. So child malnutrition is 50% higher in tribal children. Right, 42% compared to 28% in others. That is, 42% of the children are tribal as malnourished as compared to 28%. Okay. Then tribal people, naturally, their economy is not all that developed. Their incomes, even mainland, non-tribal areas, again, they're not so this thing. So they are heavily dependent on government-run institutions. But we know that the government is not spending adequately in the budget. It is only 1.2% of the GDP, so it is not adequate. So we need to increase this spending. We need to increase this to 2.5%, at least 2.5%. And more focus has to be given to the tribal areas. Then we do not find any participation of the tribal people locally or at the state level or the national level. It's like the first time we have a tribal president, and overall amongst the leaders also very, very low reflection over here. So be it locally, be it at the level of state or national, we have very little participation of the tribal population. Then as part of the financial outlay, there is something known as tribal subplan. In fact, there is tribal subplan and there is this SC subplan. Combined to it is known as SC-ST subplan. So the idea is very simple. When the government, when the plan is being made, plan of the budget, how the budget would be spent. So in that, whatever budget is allocated, so let's say budget for healthcare is allocated. So when that budget of healthcare, there will be certain areas, certain pockets in a country where scheduled tribe population will be more, or scheduled castes will be more. SC-ST subplan. So in proportion, like the budget on healthcare is there. So in that, if let's say there is 50% is tribal population, so 50% of the budget should be spent in such a way that it benefits the scheduled tribe population in that area. Likewise, if there is 50% SC, so in proportion of that, the money should be allocated. So we see a very poor implementation of the tribal sub plans. Fine. Then we do not have any separate data on tribal people's health or healthcare or on the money spent. So we're talking about the government over here. So that is not very, very good. Okay. So what has to be done then? We have some issues over here. So these are the issues. So you see, this is basically your answer. And I like people who are from committees or who've been in IS, they write it in a very structured way. So they don't really innovate while writing. So we get good points. It's very easy to analyze. Right. So we get the issues, we get a bit of an introduction also. You get the facts, right? You can briefly mention that we rank poorly as per the Lancet report or anything, and you can start your answer. Then what has to be done? So there have been several committees. Most importantly, there was the National Tribal Health Action Plan as suggested by the Expert Committee on Tribal Health Constitute, which submitted its report in 2018. So measures should be taken in accordance with that for increasing the healthcare, for reducing the healthcare gaps, so the gaps in the healthcare sector. There should be additional allocation of money. The tribal sub-plan should be effectively implemented. Greater autonomy of the community or the engagement of the community should be there in governance aspect. So they should be made the key stakeholders in implementation of the schemes. So these are certain things that has to be done. You can always talk about the intensified immunization program. Right, so intensified immunization program. Then we can also talk about the aspirational districts program. Now coming to the next article, the fight for fiscal autonomy. So this topic is very large. So what I'm doing is, what all observations are there that I'm sharing in a very simple way. Okay, so this article seems to be triggered by an observation. Maybe that's how it introduces. Is that the finance minister said that the state should do more on the issue of price rise, right? So that should be done. Okay. But then at the same time, the states have limited fiscal room. So they have limited fiscal autonomy to do that thing. So let us understand. So see, there are two types of taxes. One is direct tax and other is indirect tax. So direct tax is your income tax, corporate tax. So all of that is part of your direct tax. It's directly levied on a particular person. I'm earning so much, so much tax I have to pay. This tax is going to the union and solely to the union. And there are these indirect taxes. When you buy something, on that you pay the GST. That is an indirect tax. Anybody who buys that person will be paying a tax. So indirect taxes, and GST is the best example, right? Most of the taxes have been merged into, subsumed into the GST. So earlier there were these indirect taxes, but both levied by both the union as well as the states. So most of them have been merged together. For example, I'll tell you something. Let's say there's a pen over here. So there was an excise duty. Excise duty is when something is produced, that time you have to pay this tax to the center. And when it is sold in the market, same pen, when it is sold, then you have to pay sales tax. And that sales tax would go, or the VAT will go to the state government. So there used to be an excise duty. It was around 12.36%. And then there was the sales tax that one had to pay. So this was actually merged into the GST. And this GST is now applicable same GST is applicable across the country. Now tomorrow this, obviously, okay, so this is there. And this GST goes to both your union as well as to the states. Best example is when you go to a restaurant, when you pay the bill. So you see the CGST, center's component of GST, and state GST. So both, it goes to the center as well as the state. Now consider the scenario. Today, some financial crisis takes place, or Kerala says that we want to raise more revenue because of the floods that have taken place. For welfare, we need to do more. Sorry, you can't raise the taxes. It's under the GST, which can be decided by the GST Council also. You see, the states have very little room to do those things, to raise the revenue or anything. So this autonomy has been taken away by introduction of the GST. You will find that the union, when they want to raise extra revenue, and if they cannot do it by means of income tax or corporate tax, so they will impose cess or they will impose surcharge. But that's not the case with the states. They can't do that. When the center needs a problem, there is something, they can keep increasing their taxes. So tax on tax is known as cess, and surcharge is this thing. Okay, there is this very good article actually, right, on your Byju's website, which explains the cess, right? So infrastructure cess on motor cars, Krishi Kalyan cess, Swachh Bharat cess. So they can keep doing that, but not, that thing is not with the state. So it is also not a level playing field between the center and the states. Okay. So that is there. It's a very fair argument over here. Okay, so that is a problem. Now, one more thing about these taxes are, we have the direct tax. Now, not all the observations in this article is about the federal aspect, but interesting observation. And we have the indirect tax. So it's very clear that direct tax is on income of a person, individual, income tax, and income of a company, corporate tax. So direct tax. So it's in a way we can say that the rich are taxed, the government gets revenue resources, and that can be redistributed to the poor in terms of welfare schemes, etc. So it's only those people who earn a living and who earn beyond a certain threshold, they are paying the tax. And indirect tax, anybody goes to the market and buys something. I buy Parle-G, poor child buys Parle-G, they are also paying the indirect tax. Okay. So what is happening in our country is, first of all, we have a high income inequality. High inequality in our country. So we have some indicators over here. So we have the World Inequality Report 2022. So we have that. So according to this, please note down these points. 1% of India's richest held 22% of the national income, and 10% held 57% of national income. I want you to use these things regularly so that you are able to recall this, right? Okay. Then there is this World Poverty Clock, which identified India as the second highest number of extreme poor people, right? So we have this thing. Now, before going forward, please Google this. Which agency has released this report, right? This can be asked in your prelims. Okay. So we have all these inequalities. So it's logical to tax the rich. They should be taxed at a higher rate. Indirect tax should come down. But what is happening is that the share of indirect taxes are actually going up and direct taxes are coming down. So see, obviously, if this is increasing, this share will automatically come down. Okay, so the share of indirect taxes of the gross revenue in fiscal year 2019 increased by up to 50% compared to 43% in 2011. Very good fact, very good indicator, right? So please, yeah. Now, when we compare it with other countries, it's always good to compare where are we as compared to other countries. So when we look at the developed countries, the best indication of what developed countries are doing is, there is a group of countries known as OECD, so advanced economies. So in those countries, the indirect taxes, their contribution is only 33%. So indirect taxes. So the governments over there are generating revenue from the direct taxes, 67% on an average. And where are we? Bulk of it is coming from, and we are an unequal country. Bulk of our revenue is coming from the indirect taxes. So that is a flaw over here. And then we also keep hearing about the taxes being slashed, especially for the corporate sector, from 35% to 22%. Okay, so this thing is coming down. Right. That's not really a bad thing. We need to attract investments. We need to increase the tax compliance. That is a separate thing. But yeah, this is there. Okay. Then if a state wants to, next aspect, if a state wants to do more for the citizens, actually they need budgetary outlay, but they have to make do with the existing resources. They cannot raise additional resources. So that is a problem. And when income tax, corporate tax is being paid, it is also, it's across the country. It's coming from across the country. It is not, from Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. All states are paying that. All citizens of all the states are paying that. Now there is a problem over here. It says that developed states, so they get only 30 paisa if income tax, corporate tax is being paid by the citizens. Any tax is coming from Tamil Nadu and the developed states, the southern states. We have indication of Tamil Nadu. So if they pay 1 rupee in taxes, if 1 rupee goes to the union, they get only 30 paisa. While the Bimaru states, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, they get rupees 2 to rupees 3 per every rupee. Naturally, the center wants to allocate more resources because there is more poverty in those areas. We need more investments in those areas. But then doesn't it seem unfair to those states who are performing well? And they are in their, I mean, obviously they should get how much they're paying. Something should come to their kitty also. Right? So this is a problem over here. Okay. So yeah, this is a matter of concern. Then the point on cess and surcharge. The share of cesses and surcharge in the gross tax revenue of the union government has nearly doubled between 2011 and 12 in the last decade, basically. States cannot do that. That seems a bit unfair. So we have some good observations about this fiscal autonomy and some issues about the financial aspects. Okay, so this is done. I'll suggest you please take a screenshot, or I'll share this with you on my Telegram channel. A people's campaign to rebuild Kerala. Some of it seem to be motivated by the Silver Line Express. Okay, so what has to be done? I've not read this in complete, but I get the understanding over here, basic understanding. So whatever is to be done to be rebuild Kerala because of the floods, etc., we should keep in mind the health of the ecosystems and ecology. We have to be mindful of that. When we are doing this development processes, developmental activities, we should be mindful of the overall ecosystem. For example, construction of office complexes on residential areas on a new piece of land, which used to be a wetland. So wetland is filled, or river path is there, which the river used to flow, but it's not flowed for the last 100 years. That land is occupied, and developmental activity had taken place over there. So these activities should be checked. We should be mindful of the ecosystem. So when there is a lot of water that is flowing, so it is flowing from that path also, right? That is the problem. People have come into the ecosystems. Besides the disasters that are taking place, more rainfall, fine, that is there, but people are also living in the flood prone areas. Okay, so one is this thing, we should be mindful of the local ecosystems. Then we should keep in mind, we should have the participation of the locals as to what the locals want in governance aspects. Do they want that development or not? You want a fast high-speed rail to pass, but do the people over there want it? You want some initiative to take place, but do the people want it? What reservations do they have? For instance, there may be a forest nearby that area, and the government wants an office complex or something to take place, but people are not happy. They feel that that environment, that forest area, has some ecological benefit. So more engagement of the local bodies, of the locals, should be there in the developmental processes. So that should be done. Okay. They were from perspective, I had this thing. So, there is this, we have sacred groves. So these sacred groves in Kerala are known as Sarpa Kavus, right? So important for pre. Okay. Somebody filed a petition at the Supreme Court. They want, minority status. So presently, if we have to define minority, minority is defined on the basis of a state. Like in a state, Hindu population is so much, Muslim population is so much, Sikh population is so much. It is state-wise. So minorities are decided by the state-wise. Somebody filed a petition with the Supreme Court that it should be at the district level. So the Supreme Court said that this is against the law. It is not feasible. Okay, property deals, Ayodhya thing, that property thing happened. Some wrongdoings had come up. Okay, this is very, very important. Rajya Sabha bids farewell to Venkaiah Naidu, former Vice President. Bill to set up carbon markets, passed in Lok Sabha. So what is this carbon markets? Okay, this is important, right? Why do we need this and all those things? This is important. One second. Okay, so there is an amendment that is made to the Energy Conservation Amendment, obviously amendment to this bill. So Energy Conservation Bill 2022. What does it do? It establishes carbon credit markets and brings large residential buildings under the energy conservation regime. So two things have taken place. One is establishment of carbon credit markets and brings large residential buildings under the energy conservation regime. Obviously, large residential buildings can do a lot more. They can have solar panels or centralized heating, water heating, whatever. They can do a lot more in saving energy. Okay, so carbon credit markets, where does it come from? So see, every country is required to commit to climate change, right? So they are required to commit to climate change. It may so happen that foreign country or a company is not able to, they have money, but they were not able to invest in things that could result in addressing climate change. Maybe they are using unclean energy or whatever. So, there is this lawful requirement that you have to do something to preserve the carbon emissions. Let's say the Delhi Metro, and it happened actually, Delhi Metro is saving electricity. So they are saving pollution actually. So because they are running on electric this thing, and maybe electric is coming from the solar panels. Maybe. So if that is happening. So they are saving on carbon emissions which may have taken place because of using of polluted pollution, coal-based power, etc. That is not taking place. So carbon is being saved, carbon emissions not taking place. So as a result of this, they are earning carbon credits because they are saving from carbon emissions. These credits can be monetized to raise more capital. Those people who are not able to do it, they need credits. So these can be monetized for the credits. So that is one system that had come up with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. More specifically around the Kyoto Protocol. So around this time, we had this talks about such framework should be there where the developed and the less developed countries can work together. So this introduction of this law provides the framework for setting up of carbon credit markets. Fine. So this is one of the things that the bill is doing. Then the bill mandates the use of non-fossil sources like green hydrogen. What is green hydrogen? I have a video on this. So yeah, green hydrogen, pros and cons. Prime Minister Modi had said we want to be a gas-based economy. Next year he said we want to be a hydrogen-based economy. Right. So these are important things. Green ammonia. I have to research this. Green ammonia, biomass, and ethanol blending and all. Again, here we have a video on this. Right. So it mandates the use of this. And what about the residential buildings? It says to establish carbon market, enhance the scope of energy conservation building code. So what things should the buildings, large buildings, residential buildings, etc. must do to conserve electricity? For that, there should be a list of things known as code. So that should be there. And if you're not going by that code, then a penalty must be imposed. Naturally, otherwise, what is the point of having a code? Okay. So this there, and this for this we need the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is already there in Ministry of Power. So we need more staffing, increase the number of members in the governing Energy Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So when this bill was introduced, and Mr. R.K. Singh is the Minister for Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. So when this bill came in, opposition also said, yes, absolutely, we need this. Then there is some pertinent questions. So Supriya Sule from the NCP, she said that what are you doing about the renewables as you are promoting more of the mining activities? Okay, so that happened. Besides this is again a very, very important topic from the point of view of GS2. For this carbon credit thing, maybe GS2, GS3 also environment, more of GS2 because what the government is doing. So GS2 government is doing for environment is also what is the government doing. So that should be GS2. Okay. Yeah, arbitration center bill. So bill is being introduced just to change the name of the arbitration center in Delhi, right? So just to change the name, it has come. Okay. Now, what are these arbitration centers and why do we need these arbitration centers? That is a theme from the mains perspective. And here we have this thing. So Kiran Rijiju, one minister of law, so he said that the Indian companies prefer to seek arbitration in Singapore or London as compared to India. Right, so we need the arbitration to take place in India as well. And I think one of the cases, Prime Minister had said that we want this to be India to be an arbitration center. Okay, so these are important. We'll do this, make videos on this. Let's see. Okay, yeah, JE results have come. Government plan system to score dailies for public grievances. I missed this article, but yes. So use of technology to solve this, and there we have something known as centralized public grievance redressal and monitoring system. This is clear. I think this is the name itself, centralized public grievance redress and monitoring system. So use of technology, use of e-governance, its application, and also with reference to public grievances. 80% decline in fake currency notes, 3 dead in stampede at Sikha temple. So yeah, this was on the pilgrims on the Ekadashi day. Right? So you should know basics about this. And, it's the Khatu Sham temple in Sikha district of Rajasthan. Okay, now we have international news. I think it's same things. China military begins new Taiwan drills. So they were supposed to end. They are not doing this. So good opportunity for them to continue all this. Okay, Kremlin accuses Ukraine of shelling atomic power plant. US Senate adopts climate health bills, right? So they are going to do more on the climate aspect. So the commitments that they made in the Glasgow summit, India also made. So on that, they are going to spend more money on this. Likewise, for health sector. EU releases final text of after Iran nuclear talks. I'll do this tomorrow. Okay. Now we have the business news. So telecom sector seems to be doing well. So net rises Bharti Airtel 5-fold as new users, data per revenue. Rupees slides 39 paisa on dollar demand. Fine. Infra worth 1.62 lakh crore to be monetized in fiscal year 23. Give you a brief context. So monetized, right? So sometime back, the government came up with a scheme known as National Monetization Pipeline. So the government says that we have some assets already there. We're not earning adequate revenue from that. Let's say a highway. So let's give this to the private sector. So private sector may give about what 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores, 1 lakh crores. So they can get revenue. So they buy the rights to that highways, and from there they can keep collecting toll. Right? They will keep collecting toll, So this operation is known as toll operator transfer. This is just for the highways. Likewise, there could be some public sector company or anything. So the private sector gets access to these companies for some time, gets access to these assets for some time, and by paying money, this money goes to the government. So the government had identified some assets that were lying with them, and they said that they will be able to monetize rupees 6 lakh crores. Now, as per my this thing, it is normally 1/10 of what they say. Okay, so this year they say that we will generate 1.62 lakh crore, right? So let's see how much they are able to do on that front. Yeah, it's a parliament going on, so these things they keep talking about this, so it comes in the news. Okay, so yeah, so this is the sports section. You can have a look. Right then, so this concludes our analysis. So thank you for streaming in to our channel IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye.